Welcome to Grassroots Self-Treatment. I'm Esther Smith and this is Eva Kauffman, and we're really excited to introduce this kit to you today that we've designed specifically for older adults. What we've done is really tailored the exercises in this video to meet your needs, and we feel like it's a nice comprehensive self-treatment kind of maintenance kit for that longevity, for improved performance and sustainability. So we're going to increase circulation, increase your breathing, help even to promote improved bone health, and we're going to get you moving in a variety of ways so that you can become more uniformly developed. So get ready to kind of decompress and mobilize and strengthen. You're just going to need a few tools for this kit. One is a static strap, a yoga block is really nice, a half foam roller, and then a full length foam roller as well. And in just a minute, we'll meet back and we're going to get started with this kind of fun postural movement section of the kit. Okay, so we invite you to come to standing with us and have a little floor space, have a chair nearby, and then have that gear that we just mentioned nearby. We're going to start with a little standing postural assessment. So we want you just to find your 2 feet on the ground. Eva's going to face me. And what I want to address with you here is just how we should be stacked up in our vertical alignment when we're standing, because we want to really transfer some of these skills to different planes in space. The way you're stacked up in standing should look a lot like the way you are in lying, both on your stomach, on your back. Parts of this should show up in sitting, etc. So we'll just kind of walk through these different planes in space, different movements and positions, and try to bring these skills together for you that will then translate later in the kit as well. So 2 feet just underneath your hips, and your feet pointed pretty much straight ahead. You can draw a little line from the center of your heel to in between your second and third toe and arrange that on a straight line on the floor underneath you. And then you want, from this side view, to arrange yourself in a vertical plumb line. So that really might start with what your hips are doing. So if we find our outside hip center, which is this kind of knobby, bony protuberance on the outside that you can feel kind of roll in and out if you swivel your hip around, that knobby center should land right over your outside ankle bone. So if we drop a little strap, plumb line, you want to find where you can float your pelvis so that that strap lines up right over the outside ankle bone. Most of us kind of live with our pelvises really forward, and so you usually need to kind of float that back a little to get that pelvis right over that ankle center. And then you want to find that your shoulders are right over your that hip center and the ankle center, so that you're forming a little bit more of that vertical plumb line there. That looks good. If you can knit your ribs down a little, this happens for most of us, that we kind of pop our ribs forward. So if you can kind of bring your pubic bone up and back at a diagonal to your 12th rib and kind of like tether those two things together, have a little line of energy there, that'll bring those ribs in, nest those down, and usually it brings what is usually our kind of shoulders behind us to shoulders right over that vertical plumb. And then the ears should fall in that vertical line as well, so that when you're all said and done, you get a pretty good vertical plumb line, ears over shoulders, shoulders over hips, hips over ankles. We're going to do this little series where you're going to spend some time on one foot, and that's a challenge because you take away your base of support, you take away a little bit of that feedback from your environment, and your brain has to deal with this new kind of sensory information. And as we age, if we don't challenge our balance, we lose our balance. As soon as you start challenging it, you start learning and you get better really quickly. So an awesome thing to practice. So Eva calls this the standing hip dance, because you get to take this little tour. She's standing just on her left foot right now. And she's gonna go through these different little leg series motions right now. She's stretching the leg out in front and taking the leg behind. I'm gonna use a bar here to say, we want this hip bar. If I was to put a little dowel now through her hip center instead of her ear dowel, this is her hip dowel or trochanter bar, that stays level as she's on this one foot. We have the tendency, do you want to hold that? To drop and to lose our hip control from that standing side. And it's okay to sway, wobble, deal, just as long as you can kind of come back to neutral and be able to find neutral again. So on this right leg, going through now out to the side, and across front. So you get a little adduction here, cross back, abduction, abduction across to the outside, and then cross front. Cross out. Good, cross back. Keeping that trochanter bar level, using something for fingertip support, back of a chair, railing, counter, so you don't fall over. Her left foot's having to deal a lot with the stability right now, so some shakes in that ankle's okay. Circles, clockwise and counterclockwise. So really, you're doing so much of the work on that standing leg, even while the right leg is moving. Let's switch sides. Good. Forward, back. Just a few reps. If this is a challenge to you, you're all over the place, spend more time here than what we're going to do. We're just giving you little samples of all these little things that you can do to, again, kind of challenge yourself, promote that longevity, deal with some of these things that we don't do enough of so that you can get better at them, and then these transfer to you being better at all the fun things you want to be doing in life. Good. Crossing front, out to the side, crossing back, which is a real challenge. Great. And then circles, just kind of stirring the leg in the socket, and again, kind of promoting a little bit of a different challenge to that standing leg. Now we're going to do a little different version of this. You're going to have a standing leg, but you're going to kind of move your body on the standing leg versus moving one leg free like that. So you're going to do this tip like you're a drinking bird, that little toy that you see. And Eva's tipping and keeping her spine neutral and her legs coming straight back behind her. And she's going to use that moving leg and the standing leg to be really strong, especially at the back hip and side hip, to not collapse and fall apart in this. It's a really challenging exercise to kind of keep your body oriented and tip everything on that standing leg. But as you get better, you can kind of play with kind of making an airplane out of yourself and then just tipping that airplane on this like leg of a pedestal. And now she's going to tip this way, and everything comes with her as she rocks on that standing leg. Really challenging stuff. She's doing a ton of work to her left side here. This left side has to stay up and under her and kind of button under her hip there and tuck her thigh under her hip a bit. And then she's doing this all with a straight knee as well here. So that'll promote a little bit more balance if you can keep that knee straight. Good. So those side tips. Excellent. Switch sides. We'll go into that drinky bird front back tip. Keeping her head and neck pulled up and in so that she's not leading the way and dropping through her shoulders first and chin first. Keep everything in that standing plumb line and basically just tip it over the standing leg. Good. Awesome. As little fingertip support as possible while still not falling over. Do this in a corner, perhaps, of your house. So that if you are afraid of falling, you have some walls to catch you, or I guess you wouldn't be able to move. I don't know. Figure out some place where you feel safe. No falls. Good. And then tipping over. Awesome. Using that outside and back hip musculature to control that. We're going to take you up onto a block. We'll do a little of that hip hiking here. So one foot on the block. Other foot hovers directly next door like you're standing in line at the bank. That's a tough thing to do. So step up on the block and hover the other foot. So now your body has to deal with all of this sensory information. All right, where is my body in space now? How can I get this other foot to hover right next door? That's a challenging thing. Little to no fingertip support. Step back up for me. And you're going to do that little hip drop and recover. So we can let our leg go long to the side of the block and recover it with this standing leg on the block. That's doing the work. You're not scrunching the same side waist, picking up there and creating wrinkles in your shirt. Instead, pay it out from this left standing side in this case and reel it back in from that same musculature. Now imagine, pause. Could you close your eyes here for 30 seconds? Try that, because that'll flood the brain with a whole different set of learning skills that you have to do when you take your vision away. We're really dependent on our vision for balance. Not so great as we age if we're starting to get fuzzy with our vision, right? So nice to practice it. Turn it off, take the floor out from underneath you, and deal with your proprioceptive capabilities. Good. Switch sides. So first, hovering adjacent to, standing in line at the bank, eyes open. Great. Play with your little hip drop. really important for gait as we age as well, to be strong with how we walk and hike and navigate our terrain, that we have really good control from this lateral hip musculature. It gets really weak on us, bursitis develops. There's so many things that happen when our muscles aren't there to support our structure. And we want to use our structure according to its design too. So a little of those, and then let's do the eyes closed. Excellent. 30 seconds or so would be a goal. Really nice. And come off. And I'm going to show you one other balance challenge, is to use your little half roll and to stand on that sucker like it's a little wobbly balance beam. I love this one. These are things you could definitely do in the corner of your house, so that if you're feeling insecure, you could grab the walls, and you could also kind of, brace yourself if you happen to tip off. But what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're just going to step down. So that's fine. So eyes open, balance, 30 seconds. And then really a hard thing would be to close your eyes here, but it's possible. And all the shakes and wobbles, that's your body reacting and dealing, and you want those reactions to occur. You want to train those so that if you have ice underneath you all of a sudden, you're already ready for that. You've been there, you've done that. It's not the first time that's happened to you in 5 years. So think about that use it or lose it idea, and definitely challenge your balance. Walk in grass, walk in uneven surfaces, take your shoes off, spend some time kind of doing all these different things with your body so that your body doesn't forget how to do them. We got one more, Eva's favorite. She said we have to do this for you guys. This is standing footwork, and this is a classic Pilates exercise, and it's really, really great for balance and control and leg strength. So you're going to assume this Pilates V position with heels together, inner thighs and all of your inner legs really zippered together, a lot of length. Find that vertical plumb line. Make sure those ribs aren't jutted forward, and you're dealing with your pelvis and your head and neck. And the V is not very wide, by the way. She's going through knee bend first, so bend your knees, not very deeply, just a bit. And then you're going to lift up through your heels like a string is being pulled up from the crown of your head. Then with heels lifted, you straighten your knees. Straight knees, send the heels down. Good, and repeat. Bend the knees softly. Lift your heels from your crown. Straighten by straightening from your backside hip muscles. And descend like you are lowering high heel spikes into wet mud. Good, one more. Bending knees. Lifting heels up onto those tippy toes. Rising up with lifted heels. Send those heel spikes into the mud. Good, and this can be reversed. Lift heel spikes out of the mud. Bend the knees with lifted heels. Send the spikes down. Straighten the knees. Good. Lift heels from the crown, keeping your parts organized. Bend knees with lifted heels. Heel spikes in the mud. Straighten through the knees. That sequence can be done for as long as you want. It's super good. I mean, definitely spend a minute or two there if you want a little bit longer. That'll challenge your balance and give you strength almost like nothing else. So I really love that one too. Okay, so to the chair. So chair posture, important, as we've all probably sat for most of our lives. You guys might be coming off of your career and wanting to retire and hang out and lounge a little bit, but you're not allowed to. No slouching. And so what you're going to do is you're going to find yourself seated in a chair, and you're going to find those little sits bones, those butt bones that you can feel. Okay? And you're going to get right on top of them so that you're not dumped off the back, and maybe you're also not rolled too sharply to the front edge of that. And so what we want to identify here in sitting is that your spine can be in neutral, but then you can do something with your hips. What if you wanted to cross one leg over and not distort your spine at all? Hard. Okay, good. Now make a figure four, kind of man style. Good. And now we're going to turn this into a stretch. So shin is on the knee. Knee is down as much as it possibly can be, but you're lifted. Now, this is going to be really hard if you're tight in your bum or you're tight in the backs of your legs. You're going to be like this. So maybe you're going to need to sit off another block or sit more to the edge of the chair. But what I want to see out of this is that the rest of you, head, that kind of vertical plumb of ears over shoulders, and the ribs nested and tall, gets to stay vertical. And then you're going to hinge at your hip. We saw that hip hinge in a squat. And she's hinging right there and kind of dialing right here to round that, yeah, not rounding through the spine, but actually keeping that neutral curve in of the low back and then hinging it into a really nice seated hip stretch. Excellent. Switch sides. This is kind of a piriformis stretch. Really nice thing, but you're learning to disassociate your spine from your hips and leg. You can do something with your lower half and it doesn't have to affect and drag your upper half into that. That's going to give you a lot of longevity. You need to be able to hinge at the hip while still keeping the spine in neutral to not sit there in pain potentially or have issues if you do that repeatedly. Good, so just a seated figure 4 stretch. We're going to come to lying on our backs. So now a little tour of what it feels like to lie down on our backs and still have a vertical plumb line. Maybe if you kind of feel like your spine lifts you and your head is kind of crumbled back behind you, if you have a lot of mass or structure there that's doing that to your shape, let's not distort that. Instead, let's accommodate it and put something under the head. That's too tall for Eva, but that's an example of what you might want, just a block or a pillow or something there. But I'll take that away. She looks pretty good in that position because what I'm looking for, again, are her ears in line with her shoulders, or her shoulders in line with her hips, knee, ankle. But just kind of keep in mind that you want to have that nice arrangement of your body structure. And then what we're going to do is just bend our knees. And just a real quick lesson on how to move and hinge at our hips again without distorting our spine. Put your little fingertips on the little bony prominences of your pelvis. Let's see if you imagine that there's water sitting in this little bowl of your abdomen right here, a bowl of your pelvis. Let's keep that water still, not let it slosh backwards or forward or to the side, no sloshing. Instead, can you quietly, like it's a secret, pick one foot up off of the deck and not distort your spine as you hinge your hip. Yeah, Eva's showing an example of kind of that crunch that can happen. And then set it back down. Now to do this, she's going to press firmly into the ground with one leg and quietly lift the other foot off the floor. So these are called pistons. We might kind of see these later on. Just that nice, quiet hip flexion ability. This is your squat done on your back. Good. Okay, and you could take that and without distorting your spine, you could slide one heel out. You're going to find that you need to probably belt a little with your musculature of your lower abdomen. You might need to pull up as you stretch out so that as you stretch out, you're not dragged down by that and kind of pulled along. Good. So there's a little oppositional energy, a vertical lift, and as you're also reaching at the same time. Great. And then let's teach a bridge because I want you guys to get in touch with this backside hip musculature here. So feel those pokey, well, not the pokey bones, they might be pokey on some of you, but your butt bones or your sits bones. Find those landmarks underneath your butt flesh, okay? The ones you were sitting on in the chair a moment ago. And the way to initiate this bridge, which is just a fabulous exercise for all of us, but certainly as we age, we should be doing this because it gets us in touch with this back leg musculature. The first thing you want to do is feel those sits bones lift towards the backs of your knees or towards the ceiling a little bit. So they do this little perk upwards, almost like you're kind of dialing your hips that way, or sometimes Eva says like feels like somebody's pulling your pants down because you're taking that musculature and you're kind of lifting it in that direction. And then you're standing through your feet. Maybe those, you know, that wet mud is here again and you're stepping into that wet mud and impressing your feet into that. And then you're going to just nicely articulate parts of your spine. You're going to peel up with your sits bones, peel up your tailbone, your midsection, your ribs, all the way up to your shoulder blades. And then set that tip of shoulder blades down, ribs down, waist down, hips down. And the very last thing to drop would be those sits bones back to neutral. Good. So that's a little bridge tutorial. We'll do more with that in a second. Let's come on to hands and knees. The big thing here that we want to teach you guys is this idea that you shouldn't be collapsed in your shoulder blades like that when you're doing something. Because what if you want to take one hand off and mop something? And then there's all that collapse to your spine and wear and tear. It doesn't feel good. So you could push the floor away. Make it so that your shoulder blades are really wide and flush. You kind of nest your sternum up into your shoulder blades. Now take a hand away and deal. See how much better that is and how strong that is? Now lower just by bending the left elbow. Yeah, without distorting that. Still push the floor away, reach, lift the head and neck, and then come back and switch sides. So this becomes really functional for us as we need to garden and do things down on hands and knees, to not collapse, to maintain all this good stuff, to hinge at your hips, to maybe still use those back leg muscles we just felt in the bridge while we're here. You can go one arm away. Good. And the other arm away. All right. So we call that active cat because you're like a cat on the ground. You're active when you're pushed away. You're lazy when you're sunk in. So we'll see that maybe a little bit more too. We'll refer to that. All right, let's go on to our stomachs. Another challenging position. Are you ever here? Maybe not. It might have been years since you've been on your belly. But we need to be here because this is where we can develop a lot of strength of our back musculature. Hands underneath foreheads, your upper body relaxed. Let's see about this hip extension again because we lose this as we age. We have a lot of forward motion, not a lot of back motion. So we're gonna arrange ourselves. If you find yourself kind of with your butt kind of sticking out and you're a little tugged and pulled on, could you ask those sits bones to just kind of traction and kind of snap to the back of your thigh? Maybe they're headed down towards your heels a little. Maybe you're reaching through your heels. Kind of soften that lumbar curve a little. And from that little pinning of sits bones to the back flesh of your thigh, can you lift one leg in a lengthened position just off the floor barely without distorting your back? Good. Can you lower it with efficiency? Can you do the other side? This isn't a big butt squeeze. She's not clenching her buns. Instead, she's got more of this just upper thigh action happening here without any negative effect or crunching or pulling on the low back. So there's a lot of length to be able to do that and a lot of delicate strength right here at this glute ham connection that we'll be referring to a little more later in the kit as well. So just a little piece on those hip extensions. What if you could kind of keep that tethering, that length and that traction outward and bend one knee at a time without, again, distorting your back. So a little disassociation. Can you find those hamstrings working? Good, to flex the knee and still maintain a neutral spine. And then two knees, bending at the same time. Maybe your kneecaps come up off the floor ever so slightly, but they're still tractioning to the baseboards behind you. Really good. Two more knee bends. Awesome. One more. Great. So in a second, we're going to actually be on the mat and we're going to go through some really great mobility stuff for you guys.
All right, so we're into this next section that we call mobility, which is kind of getting you ready to move. So I love how Esther put together some of those really nice skills and techniques of how we want to manage our bodies in space. So now we're going to kind of just open you up, get you on the floor, move around, feel like you can do a little bit of stretching. And we're going to start by coming onto your sides. We do this little series called windmill arms. We're going to start by pulling the bow. It's nice to have a little something maybe under your head so it doesn't feel like it's kind of dangling out there in space, but otherwise you're pretty much just lying kind of somewhat fetally. And palm over palm, knees are bent, stacked one on top of the other. And then you're going to go ahead and just draw the right arm. It's going to kind of slide past the other one. You're going to feel yourself go into a little twist. And then you're going to start to pull your bow. It's going to come all the way across your chest. Your elbow gets to bend, and you'll get to open up, right? And then it's going to come back and then glide past. So I literally just feel my palm come right across my arm, come across my chest, and you want to feel how, as you open, we'll just do one more of those. As you open that right arm, you're going to feel your chest kind of open toward the ceiling. Your hips are still stacked, and there's that oppositional twist. Go back and come back down. Good. So now she's going to start by circling the arm up overhead as though she were a compass, right? With the point in the center and then that pencil that's kind of drawing a nice full circle. You'll notice you pass right through that same twist you were just in. I encourage you to take a moment in that place that might be kind of pulled tautly up here in this diagonal. So I want you to pause up there, Esther, and you're going to just reach up into that high corner And just feel your tissue kind of go with. So you feel all that opposition. You feel like a star right here. Good. The arm comes down and the torso resolves. We're going to do 3 of those in the reverse direction. So you come down over the hip. The torso has to really be willing to open so that you don't get pinned back there with your arm kind of falling off of the shoulder joint. So you want to see if the torso can open enough that the shoulder joint isn't just dangling there. And if you feel like you can't make that pass, then you'll want to have that arm just a little bit elevated, kind of like a big wing that has to kind of come up over the head. And good. Great. So once you've done that side, just flip yourself over, kind of go back on your screen and do a little reverse so you can be talked through the other side. I'm not going to take the time right now to do that, but I think you absolutely should. And when in between those segments, just lay on your back, Esther, for a moment. You'll find as you do that, you might have noticed that that side that you've just affected should feel a little bit longer because that whole length just gives this whole side body, our big muscle groups here, a stretch, okay? So that's something you'll want to do on the other side. And then you'll return back to your back as Esther has here. Knees will be bent. We're going to do a little series called the crossovers. Set yourself up so your heels are directly in line with your hips or those sitting bones. We've already found those spots. And you can just take your hands toward your sides, maybe just even a little wider than sides. And then we're going to cross the right leg up over the left leg, lady style. And the first action is going to happen down here at that standing foot. And you're going to pivot onto that edge of the foot, outer edge of the foot. And that's going to take you into a twist now from the lower end. And then we're going to come back. So what you're going to notice here is that we're going into a similar twist, but we're starting it from the other end. Right? We're not doing all that arm gestural work. And we're really taking kind of our big body parts, our legs, our hips, and we're actually trying to maintain kind of level and on the mat on the shoulders. The next stage of this, which I find really delicious, is to add the sweeping arms with the crossover. You end up coming onto your side and having to navigate what it would be like to have all your good postural work on your side. Let's go ahead and open the arms out to the sides. And then we're going to bring our snow angeling arms, windmilling arms back down and resolve the lower half. So we'll take that a couple times. This becomes just a little bit of a timing and coordination situation, but you want to have a little brain moment for yourself as you've arrived to and fro this exercise such that you have that same lineup of spinal postural work that we saw when we were standing. Okay, it's much, much different on your side and a little bit foreign. Okay, so that's moving into your crossovers 1 and 2. Again, you're going to switch legs, do the other side, pull back on your download, and then be instructed through that second side. All right, let's go ahead and place the roller. Okay, next segment, roller underneath your spine. So come on up to sitting. Find your roller and lay it lengthwise and have a seat on the far end of it, okay? So that the roller can support really you from your entire spine, including your head. You don't want your head hanging off the back. And if you found, like we mentioned earlier, that you needed a little bit extra support because your head really kind of hangs back, then you can add that little bit of a pillow back there, okay? So from here, you're just going to give yourself this nice opportunity to do those same kind of windmilling type arms and stretch both sides long and then circle back down. This is a great opportunity to actually play with that lengthening and mobilizing through the shoulder girdle, right? And again, as you do this, I like having those palms nicely out. And as you go up to the top, you want to feel those little wings kind of spin so that by the time you end up at the top, your palms are facing each other at least, right? It's going to be a much healthier shoulder. So you'll notice, one more, that there's a little moment that you got to kind of like create the space for your shoulder joint to move the arm so it doesn't pinch you up at the top and kind of leave you hanging like this. So you want to see if you can't allow that space between the head, neck, and ears. Once you've done those a few times, you'll open your arms to your sides and really just kind of noodle around in here, but we like to kind of shift our body weight off the edge of the roller a little bit to either direction. Kind of steer this with your legs. You might feel that possibility of coming off or falling off the roller, but I think, you're not so far from the ground. You really just want to see if you can use the roller, and we'll just pause on one side here to open up that chest a little bit more. You can kind of play with your hand and wrist and just feel that tissue up underneath our armpits, forearms. So you're just giving yourself a little massage through this, okay? So so that's a nice little series on the roller lengthwise. I think most of our population really gets a lot of value for opening up, because as we age, we get a little bit more closed in. Our body patterns pull us in and down. So I find my older population really enjoys being suspended and nice and open like an angel here. All right. So let's move now. We're going to come off the roller. Why don't you roll off to the side? This is a good way to kind of find your way off the roller. And then resituate yourself such that the roller now is going to be perpendicular to your mat, and you're going to get your hips up onto it. I like to feel that big bony prominence of my sacrum on top, kind of like in a pedestal type fashion. And you'll see you're already kind of put into that plank that we had earlier. A way to stabilize this rolly thing is just to slide your hands to your sides on the roller and kind of just help prop it. Just with long straight arms, you don't have to use a lot of force. It'll just keep it from rolling away from you. And then with control, one leg at a time, you're going to bring one foot up off of the mat and then the other foot up off of the mat. And here now your pelvis is suspended, feels really nice. And I think everybody should just practice taking both legs up toward the ceiling, right? And then just bend and fold them in. So you're just going to do that a few times and just check in with that ability to lengthen the back of the leg, maybe all the way to a straight knee. And if that doesn't feel possible for you because your legs are too far away from you, right? You could just keep a soft knee, but let's just flex and point through the toes and maybe even do a couple little circles through the foot ankle. Exactly. Good. So this is giving you the opportunity to actually stretch the backs of those legs. So let's come into the bent knee again. I actually like to do lowering one foot down to the mat, right? You can even just put your whole footprint on the mat, and then you're going to lift that one and switch simultaneously. So this goes back to the exercise we did earlier when you saw me pick one leg up at a time, really feeling how that leg connects to you all the way up into your trunk. So you actually are maneuvering, or this is kind of your control center up through your trunk, and you get to pass these two legs by. So what if we asked now two legs together, and if we were to lower both legs, you might not get the whole way to the floor, but you should start to feel both legs back up, that you're actually having to use some strength, some core strength, right, to enable. And as Esther reminded us, that this is the hinge at the hip that we're actually interested in. So your back and your spine, which has kind of a maintenance program in and of itself back here, is staying the same. So those are some nice variations you could do for yourself. While knees are bent, hips are up, let's do a little twist, much like your crossovers. And you'll find if you keep your legs nicely together in this situation and you roll across the backside of your hip crest, you might actually even give yourself a little massage of those muscles, big muscle group that we have in our bum, right? When the knees stay together, the knees stay level, right? There's going to be they're going to want to kind of slip and shear off of each other. So, and then let's stay here for a moment, Esther. You're going to stretch both legs out, both legs in. You're going to cross over. So you're going to add this extra length, which as you do that, I'm going to encourage you to really feel how that kind of radiates from your center, a bit like a star. And then last one. Good. And then you could actually keep your legs straight and just do a couple tick-tocks. This is might be where you start to feel the roller kind of slip away. So just give it a little scooch, lift it up, and you'll be good to go with that. Great. All right, so then from the top here, what if we take one leg forward over the roller, right? Kind of as a long extension of your trunk, and then back up toward the top. And you'll just kind of begin to do what we call scissors. And I'd continue to kind of lengthen and stretch that one leg forward, again, like you're a star. And then you could just take this into a nice little bicycling action. So one leg's gonna come over the top, the other knee will bend. Just imagine you're on a gigantic like unicycle or something. Good work. And I'm kind of a proponent of exaggerating the movement. So you don't want your bicycle to be kind of out here. You want to see if you can't, almost like you're pantomiming the action of a bicycle. Let's go ahead and reverse that a few times. Nice. And I think the whole goal with this series that we do up here is you have to work from your center while maintaining some, a nice breathing pattern for yourself, but you're also getting those hips to mobilize at their hinge using the weight of your leg lever. You can assemble both legs up at the top. Let's re-stretch them up, and now you're gonna kind of turn the toes open, spinning the leg kind of in your hip sockets, and then you're gonna open out to the sides, and you're gonna feel gravity kind of help you give this nice stretch and back up, right? As you do this, you might have a sense of kind of corseting your hip structure so that you're not just kind of letting all the pieces fall apart, but you're being really clear about right leg turning right over the hip socket, left leg turning left over the hip socket. Last one, stay out to the side now and bend both knees. See what that feels like. Maybe try to press those feet together, and you could do a slow lowering of the feet. You'll begin to feel the potential of a stretch. You're gonna come back up and then back out to the sides and up to the top. So that's your little sequence. You're gonna open out to the sides. You're gonna kind of gather the space between the legs, press the feet together so you feel connection, lower them slowly, pick them up with your center, exactly, super nice, open out to the sides and back up. Right, so good. We could do our little helicopter where we go into a single split of the legs, one forward, one back. And then lefty's gonna go left, righty's gonna go right. They're gonna meet back in opposite ends and then pass back through each other. And you're just gonna continue that directional preference there so that you do about 3 of these, what we call helicopters, all the way around. Then when it's time to switch, you could just do a little switch once, switch twice, and then you're back to the other side. Good. I'm just gonna stay out of the way over here. But again, see what you can do with the coordination. If I were gonna come in here and assist Esther, I'd kind of say, okay, make sure that they're evenly oppositional, right? So gotta use your mind on that one and really try to put that coordination together. Don't let them lag away from you and then come back up. Good. That's kind of a fun series to play with. Again, we're looking at trying to improve the mobility of our hip so we have a good hinge and we don't lose all the actions, because our hip is one of our greatest mobile features and one of our strongest joints. So we want to be able to maintain as much of that, keep a healthy hip. This could be done even if you have a replaced hip, but you want to go follow the protocols of your doctor depending on how far out you are in that surgery. But it's actually proprioceptively a really useful tool for that replaced hip. All right, so we're going to come down out of that, so you can kind of just lift your fanny and slowly roll that roller away. It'll put the rest of your lower back onto the mat. And we're going to come into just a little bit of a stretch, but I want you to have some good technique when you stretch. So we're going to use our static strap. You're going to place it underneath the sole of one of those feet. Right, and actually start with that one bent here for a second. You can even kind of bend both for a second. Right, so first of all, just see if you can't align that spine, that structure that we had, orient the pelvis so that it's not going to get pulled up and off. So one leg's going to come up and off. That'll be the one in the strap. Sorry about that. And then when you go to stretch the top leg, also lengthen the bottom leg down and out. And that's where you're going to find that scissor that we were just in. And this might inform your scissor on the roller in the future, but I'm going to just kind of show visually that when I have people do this stretch, I really want them to be mindful of not letting that whole fanny kind of hike up and off. So if she were to pay attention to trying to send another leg out, I often say take left sitting bone to right ankle, but that might have her back off the shape of this just a little bit, which would be fine, but I think you're still gonna get a great stretch. Then you're using the strap to encourage the tissue to move in its longer fashion. I like a flex foot. I like reaching through the heel. And then you can kind of back off of that. And then every time you do that, you're always actually powerfully sending another piece of information. This goes back to being a star again, right? There's also nice levelness of the hip crests. So as you're doing this stretch just straight up the middle, we can also vary it just a little bit. So we're gonna take the leg a little bit open to the side, and you can adjust your hands on your straps. Yep, Esther's got the same side. Now the further you go, you just know you run the risk of everything tipping and falling. So when you have a big long leg that has quite a bit of weight to it, you actually have to create a little support structure down here in the side of the hip, which we used when I was on the block standing. So again, she's just kind of coming and going from the stretch. We call that a dynamic stretch. I want you to feel as though you have to lift up on the outer rim of your hip to open. And then if you want to take this coming across, right, you're going to cross the midline of your body, and then you're going to really do a super reach away. That's going to encourage that tight tissue of not only your outer leg, but I feel like some of that gluteal work, like when I was sitting the figure 4 stretch on the chair, this has some of that component in it as well. And we'll just do one more of those, and you'll just find that kind of the back side of your pelvis gets to open, the front side gets to narrow. Now we're just gonna add in a few circles. So again, you're gonna just kind of allow, it's like your leg is on a leash, and you're gonna allow the leg to move by coming and going with your arm, but you're gonna feel yourself pass through what I call D rings, and you can make this bigger if you choose to, and maybe drop down lengthen your arm. So it could go lower to the point where you're like, gosh, I don't even feel like I'm stretching anymore. And the truth is you're not. You're actually working on trying to strengthen, one more this way, the trunk so that you can manage the weight of your limb, right? But once again, it's all happening in the hip socket while she's remaining posturally still really upright, even though she's laying down. So this is what we would call some functional hip work. Again, super great for those of us that might have an artificial hip. And you'll notice if you do one side and it's different than the other, I mean, artificial hip or no artificial hip, there is, our hips are different typically, so pay attention to that. Go ahead and come out of that, and again, you're gonna do the other side for yourself, following the same protocol. Any kind of variations along the way is fine. And that kind of concludes our mobility, so make sure you take some time on the floor, get to know your body, and give it a massage, give it a little stretch, a little breathing, and we'll meet you back here and we'll do a little bit of strength work. All right, welcome back. We're at what we call the strength portion. This is your Pilates work. I have many older adults who come to work on their strength and their breathing, their control, and they walk out of there just feeling really healthy and mobilized and energetic. So this is what I hope for you. And feel free to kind of pick and choose as you go, and maybe add in as you can. I did find that I haven't spoken a ton about your breathing, and I think this is really the mainstay of your Pilates work, so I'd like to just address that here. So while you're down on the floor, which is where we'll be for most of all of this, I want you to sit upright like we did in the chair. And if you need the chair to be able to do that, then go ahead and grab the chair and have a seat on it. If you're able to be on the floor but you need a little boost, we can go ahead and create a little boost. We can have legs in really any which position. What I'm most interested in is your trunk, so that you have the opportunity to sit nicely upright. And I always like to bring out my little toy and kind of stack all your parts like Esther showed us with the plumb line, so that you have your head and your hips and all the parts in between nicely in this plumb line. All right, and in our breathing series, we want to make sure that we breathe kind of up and down the length of that stack, if you will. So as you draw your air in, feel like it's coming from the bottom and kind of filling up either a straw or a big bucket. Okay, so that's kind of the directionality of the breath from the bottom up to the top. On the inhale, almost like you're siphoning up through that straw. And then if you could visualize your rib cage really opening and expanding, and then completely, almost feels like you have a smaller rib cage by the time you exhale, okay? So there should be an expansion 3-dimensionally of the ribs, and you're also very welcome to kind of just feel what that's like. It's sometimes a little awkward to get your arms up there, but you could imagine that. So that's the inhale phase, and on the exhale phase, you want to feel as though you're kind of tightening a nice little belt or a corset around your entire hip crest area, such that your hip crests might feel as though they narrow, around your waist belt, right, as if you were going to cinch your belt, and maybe even all the way up into that lower aspect of your ribs, like maybe you were kind of buttoning your cardigan or something, right? So with that is kind of the metronome of this entire series. This is a nice thing to practice, and also it's very meditative in a lot of ways. I'm going to have you actually just do a little sleepy head, where you're going to let this all kind of fall apart for a moment, or go to sleep, as I say. And then from the bottom, I want you to restack. You saw this in me when I was doing the standing roll down and roll up, and this is just a nice way to practice where you get to kind of let it fall off center, mostly in the forward direction, so that you then have to rebuild this mindfully and kind of pay attention to that low, narrow hip belt, that waist belt, and that rib belt. So that's a nice thing to practice where you can come and go from that posture. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and move on into a little bit more of the strengthening, using that breathing as your kind of your song, okay? So please have a seat on your bum and bend, keep your knees bent, I think, and maybe move forward just a little bit, Esther. Okay, and we're going to start with our little seated roll down, and you're going to use your hands on your thighs, because sometimes just letting go of your hands is a little bit jarring. So I want you to be able to support yourself and kind of use your arms as a little bit of a tether. So from here, you're going to work that nice hip dial that kind of spins and turns on your legs, and you're going to notice how your pelvis is starting to roll away from your thighs. Good. Maybe hang on to your legs for a moment, stand down in your feet, pause, and do one of those breaths that we just practiced when we were seated in a new shape. And are you able to maintain kind of a nice calmness? I think you might begin to recognize that you're starting to feel some of your abdominals, which would be great. And then we're going to, on the exhale, return back up to the top as though you were stacking yourself right back up, nicely aligned. And then we're going to try to work that same idea. The key here is to motivate this from your hip muscles. And then if you can go a little bit further, keep doing the hip muscles, and then feel like you're getting kind of poked in the navel, and draw that back. And see if you can do this now with maybe unweighting your hands a little bit from your legs, right? I think you'll notice maybe those front hip muscles are going to want to tighten. So see if you can't kind of redial up that pelvis, right? And see if you can find those back leg muscles and go ahead and come back up, okay? So one last one of those for yourself. You're trying to find that place that's maybe not super comfortable, right? You want to see if you can actually sustain and build a little bit of strength in this place, right? Navel towards spine is a serious cue, hip dialing up. And then what I'd like you to actually try to do there, Esther, is can you slide one leg forward while maintaining, and then bring it back home, right? So when the leg goes forward, you don't get pulled with it, but you kind of feel, and then you could try two legs. You can just play around with that. Excellent. And then come on back up and home. Nice. So those are some little variations you can play with. I'm going to seat you back up on whatever situation you had, even if it was the chair, right? For this next exercise, we call the spine stretch. So she's going to open up her legs, feel willing to open them wider if that's comfortable for you, and a little bit of a challenge. But again, you're trying to find that seated posture. We're going to add in sneak in behind you here. We're going to add in that the lift of the arms with that breath, so that now we're able to now take this into that kind of like standing roll down, except she's seated. Good. And I sometimes like to say, just put your hands on the mat, and then maybe even slide them a little bit further on your next exhale, right? And that's where you're going to start to feel the spine stretch. One more of those right there, and a little bit slidey forward. And then you've got that same stack up that you just practiced seated until you're all the way to the top. Then we'll start again. Inhale, arms will come up, and then exhale like you're getting peeled away from the wall, and then palms on the mat, and then exhale another little slide forward. So you might be deepening into your spine stretch. Many of us are going to feel this in the backs of the legs. That's totally fine. And good. And one last one. How about inhale up and exhale? So we're doing 3 of these. You could add a few more if you wanted, right? I think giving yourself the time to make a little change in your tissue would be super nice. Feel the back stretch. Hips are rooted. And this is that undulation of the spine we spoke about earlier. We're going to now take the arms to the sides and move into a little twist, right? So you're going to twist to the right, and then stay here as you exhale. Feel like maybe you could twist a little more. Come through center, twist to the other side. Exhale, maybe twist a little more. That would be that wringing out. So you have full breath, and then you wring out that breath until it's all gone. You can have to actually use those deep muscles to make that happen. Good. Let's stay here. Inhale, and we'll go into the saw. And you're going to exhale, go into the curve over, reach, and twist. And then you're going to come up. You get to go right into the next side and twist. And you can see I'm kind of pulling on one, pushing on the other. So feel like you have, your dogs are running on leashes and they're moving in opposite directions. And we'll just do one more to this other side and exhale. Right. So this is one of those situations, not the easiest. You can rest for a moment. Not the easiest, but again, if you don't use it, you lose it. So we want to encourage you to do even the things that are a little more challenging. Arms are going to come to your sides now. Fingertips kind of aiming toward the mat. And you're just going to practice doing a side bend. And maybe as you go to the right, those right fingertips will kind of slide out the floor. And then you're going to return, stack yourself back up. So this is, taking your cylindrical stacking toy and bending it in yet another directionality, right? And getting used to being able to remain seated on the hips and feeling what it takes on your sides, both to stretch on the one side and then also to activate to come back up. If you're looking for the next challenge, you'll take your hands behind the head. We'll just do one set here where the hands are behind the head or even in front of the head. I'll show that. Exactly. And up and over. Good. Until you're back home. Good. Go ahead and slip yourself off of whatever seated apparatus you're on. And we're going to come into an exercise called the can-can, right out of Radio City. And you're going to come onto your elbows. And the first thing I notice with folks is that we kind of slump down into it, right? TV style, like you're hanging out in your living room. So be mindful of the fact you're working on strengthening, in this case, the muscles back behind the upper back and shoulders. It's also really helpful to open up through the chest. Kind of want to feel like you're beaming a light up and out of your chest, and you're still pulling up and up through the crown of the head. So the knees are going to come together. You're going to kind of lightly come onto the balls of your toes. And just doing that sometimes makes this one a sink. So stay lifted. Good. So Esther's gone into a little twist. Let's go to the left together. There's your 2 knees together twist. Over to the other side with the twist. We're going to go to the third side. And then you're going to stretch the legs upward and keep working that upper chest and then bend the knees home. So you'll see this is similar to what we did on the roller. We go to the right, to the left. You're doing a little twist in your waist. You come back over to my direction the third time. Send them up and bring them home. So you have a 1, 2, 3, extend home. Inhale 1, 2, 3, exhale out, home, right? So there's a little rhythm you can play with, but be really interested that when the legs reach out, you actually, and I'm gonna have you pause with the legs upward here, you stay and you lift even more up out of your chest, and good, plenty, right? Okay, so from here, let's go ahead and change it up entirely, lengthen the legs and flip onto your tummies. We practiced a little bit what it's like to lay on your belly, which for some of us may not feel the most comfortable. And certainly if that's not available to you, you won't do that. But it's really a good place to work on this strength. We've been talked through how to manage our pelvis in this situation, how to use our hips in this situation. So now we're going to actually look at the upper end, right? So I'm going to have you slide your hands down by your hips, Esther, right? I'm going to let you to your twist of your head. So you're going to see if you can manage that twist in your neck. And if that's not available to you, then you should be looking at our Healthy Neck Kit. But just kind of relax here for a moment. So then you're going to put your activity of your little staple or connector button here. And you're going to also bring the shoulder joint to the middle girth of your own rib cage. The elbows will lengthen, the fingertips will enliven just enough, and you're going to unload your head, cheek from the mat, and then just turn the head so you're looking directly at the mat. Your nose might even touch the mat. And now we're going to work on this hinge of the head and neck, right? Because we talked about that earlier, front-wise, and then we're going to turn the head and then lower the cheek back down and let things kind of melt or relax. And then we're going to put our little buttons back on to kind of manage the back. We're going to put the shoulders to the level of our rib cage, unload the cheek, practice the hinge with the dowel at the ears in a different directionality, and then take the twist, lower down, good. And we'll do that just 2 more times. Right? There's a lot to be said about the simplicity of this exercise. Want to really not necessarily move the upper back in this situation, but it's certainly working, right? Appropriately so. Last one, little buttons, little wings, little activity through the fingers, hinge, long neutral, head, and twist back down. So can you come now to where we're just facing like nose to the mat, right? So you say on your next repetition, you make it to here. So now you're going to take your hinge at the dowel, and then the neck is going to follow, and you're going to see if you can enliven those hands up off the mat and come into a little bit of an upper back lift, and then lower back down. And you could just be adding this in as you go, and then you're going to, again, you got to manage a little bit of that lifting of the shoulder girdle, right? Really trying to feel this whole back line. She's doing an awesome job of keeping her little buttons here. We'll just do 1 more of these. You're not going to go very far, and I get that. Like, this doesn't feel like I'm very high off the mat. When you're at this place, I'm going to have you bend your elbows and put them by your palms, or by your shoulders, I should say. And you're going to continue up in our swan, right? And you're just going to move in a range that makes sense for you, right? But you can see Esther's kind of showing what this has the potential to be and look like. But we want to see if we can't kind of reverse the undulation of our spine. And also honor the fact that it starts with that hinge at the neck follows, and then this whole shoulder girdle comes up with, and then we lower back down. So this is just a really nice way to not only strengthen our back, but open up our front side. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and just put your fingertips there underneath your forehead, right? And we're gonna come into that double leg lift that you saw me do earlier, and you're just, with legs straight. And then you're gonna do your clapping. How about slow to begin? And good. So we're just opening and closing the legs, finding that width at the hips, being able to manage and keep all the other strength in our torso working well for us. And then from here, we'll go ahead and lower those. And you're gonna slip the hands out from your forehead and go out to the side like you're a human airplane. right? Start with your palms low on the mat, and then what it's going to take for you to lift your arms is really, again, more of a reach away. So almost slide your fingertips on the floor to lift them, and then just lower them back down, right? So again, slide out to the edges of the room. There's your star. And now she's adding in this rotation. With the thumb up in the air, it kind of helps you orient. And just doing a little bit of that rotation up at the top of your airplane. Last one. Little airplane opens its wings. And do one more of those. Excuse me. You're going to come up with your arms. We're going to do the little twist. So now the airplane's going to soar to the right. And then it's going to come through center and soar to the left. And you might feel that one palm touch the mat. I'm totally fine with that, but you can feel how you get to open the chest. Good, there's a little bit of rock and roll through the trunk. And then you come back to your airplane and you lower on down. Good. So that's a lot. Go ahead and sit back onto your heels. And good. This gives you a good chance to kind of fold in the hip, fold in the knee. And then we're just going to make our way back forward onto your hands and knees, which is another place that we explored when you're kind of down on the floor, playing with your kids or your dog, gardening. And we're just going to take this to the next level. So refine those skills that we had earlier where you're really active through your cat. And then you're just going to do a little shift forward in space and a shift back in space. And I would say the thing you want to consider here is that are you able to manage the structure of this with really kind of pretty simple movement? It's not big movement, but you definitely want to be able to adjust as you go, okay? And then come back to your neutral after you've practiced that a couple times. You saw me take one arm off of the mat, but we're actually going to now practice taking one leg off the mat by lengthening it back behind you. And as though it were a secret, and you pick it up and then back home, placing it back down. What I mean by that is that as you're alternating from leg to leg, that there's very little weight shift. That's pretty tricky. So I'd like for you to really try to manage up through your uppers. So I'd push the floor away more because this is heavy out here, this limb. She's moving in this hip hinge, but managing her posture, which is really good strength, not dumping, listing, falling. So you're trying to manage that kind of center line. Now, with one leg out, let's keep that out, Esther. Your next challenge, if you're trying to go a little further, is to take the opposite arm out forward. And then they could come back together. And you'll notice as you're making these adjustments, there's a little bit of a balance issue going on that we were practicing with me standing. And you've got the whole activity up through the upper body because we're weight bearing here. So this is our way of giving you some strength components in your upper body just by using your own weight. Last set, alternating, great for balance. There's a lot of navigating. Your brain is having to make some good choices. Great. If your wrists are at all problematic, you could do this option on your fists. And can we do a floating cat here? Right? So she's going to tuck her toes under. This is a great way to feel nice and strong. Activate your cat. Good. Pull up through your core, and you'll see she's unloaded her knees from the mat. Hardly knew that happened. That's what I want to see. And you're just going to take a couple of breaths here, or maybe just find your way up, find your way down with control. And then in this place, if you're able to build your endurance, you would just breathe in that full breath, exhale full breath, and all this girdling, corseting musculature is working strong for you there. Good. Go ahead and unload your wrists or your fists, and exactly. So come back into your child's pose, and we're going to just work a little undulation of the spine. Okay, so after you've done all that hard work on your tummy and on your hands, we're going to do a little cat-like exercise, which is going to start with your blossoming cat. Hands are reaching forward, and she's going to come looping her pelvis, right? That's that hinge we've been speaking about. It's going to cause an undulation of the spine. Now, at about this place where you feel open through the front of the hips, notice how her head's still down. She's going to change her hinge to extension of the hip. Those sitting bones are going to go upward. She gets all that nice undulation while still active, and then she's going to go back with her hips high for as long as possible, as long as possible until probably at the bitter end, they will curl back under. So we're going to take that a couple times, right? Looping under, right? A natural undulation that's come up into this high region. The pelvis is going to change. Once the pelvis changes, the undulation then occurs up high. Stay active in your cat, and then sitting bones directly back like headlights going out to the back wall. Last one to go. I want you to feel nice and juicy in the hips. I want you to feel how your spine has the ability to bend and mobilize. And then you can use your exhale to make that hip hinge. You're going to feel some length up through the backs of the legs. And as you go back, you're going to deepen in the hip crease, deepen in that hip fold. Super healthy on your hips and your spine. Okay? So those are some nice quadruped exercises. Let's bring you onto your left side, Esther. So you're going to come onto your left side. Let's go ahead and lay it down such that your hand will come underneath your head. Maybe initially create a long straight line, right? Which is always kind of interesting. You kind of want to take a look at that. Once you've achieved that, you're going to bring both legs slightly forward, and then the head's going to look forward here as well. So this is kind of this is where you are going to come and go from. We're going to start with a little series where you're going to lift and lengthen top leg up and exhale lower, all while trying to manage the posture that we have looked at in a couple different situations. I mentioned that being side lying is a lot more challenging in our brains, I think, but our muscles, if we gave them a chance, could actually help stabilize. So this is just that leg lift. You saw me do it standing, and then once you come up and you have kind of this nice quiet hip, go ahead and lift that, Esther. We're going to do a few circles of the leg and foot. And they could be kind of small to begin with, but I've placed this bar here to remind her and to remind you that that listing of the hip that we practice standing is working quite a lot here. So you might not realize it, but the leg underneath is also working quite strongly by pressing down through that whole side wall of that leg. After you've done a few circles in either direction, let's go ahead and do our rainbow here as well. So we're going to have that lift up above the leg, and then we're going to spin, 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 and lower. So the spinning, even though I'm kind of manhandling her leg down low, is happening up here at the hip. So it should feel like you're kind of polishing out the hip. It's a rotational feature, and I do find some of my older adults tend to kind of lose some of that rotational feature and that strength. So we'll look at that also a little bit more in our clamshells. So let's bend both knees. I think it's probably wise to go ahead and lay your arm out here. Right, and this is where you feel, again, somewhat fetal. The feet are kind of down underneath the bum. And we're going to move into that rotation by doing these things called clamshells. You may have been, this is not probably an unfamiliar exercise, but I want you to understand the value of it in terms of that rotation. So as you open the leg, the muscles of rotation work externally. As you lower it, they also work to help lower with control. You'd like to kind of improve the mobility of the hip without dropping back to open your leg, right? So you want to do a few of those as well. And then go back to lengthening your legs long. We're going to do the little banana lift, both legs, right? So then you're going to lift the top leg up, and the bottom leg's going to try to meet it underneath, and then lower the bottom leg and the top leg, right? So that's your little series. A little bit up underneath, a little bit down. She's using this front hand just as a little bit of a kickstand to help her stay organized. Now you're going to try to lift both legs at the same time and down. And what's going on here is as she's having to lift her double leg weight, there's a lot of side trunk work happening. So this time, let's leave those legs lifted and see what you can do about reaching long with that upper end and then lower both ends at the same time. So it's like I'm going to take the two ends of her very long spanning body and just suspend them up off of the mat. Okay, I'd like more work to be happening in the trunk than in the arm, but you'll definitely need a little help with that. So feel free to do that and back down. So 3 of those is just fine. Again, take the time. Flip yourself over, get to the other side, use your little video download so you can do that. And we're going to move on to being on our backs, doing an exercise. That's a fun little challenge of balance. And you're probably going to want your strap again. So we'll hook it down over both feet. Good. And then you're going to probably be fairly long on your strap. And if you're a very long person, you'll have to rig some extra length or something. I'm not sure. But those are your reins. And you're going to work on trying to, and you're going to start at that little head hinge or ear dowel hinge. So when your head lifts, now you get to look right down at your toes. So if you lift your arms, that will lift your legs and you rise up with. You get to practice some balance, right? Lots of tummy work and control. And if you're wibble wobbling, that's fine. You're going to kind of try to figure out how to manage those wibble wobbles. And we're going to do that a few times. One thing I'll say that is kind of the key ingredient here is what's going on down low in the pelvis. And you can see she's going to do a few more wibble wobbles. Can you do that wibble wobble? Right, where the pelvis kind of rock that, right? So you want to get those hip dials working, right? That's your hip hinge. And we'll do one more of those. So now you're really putting together all these pieces of standing through your feet, your ear dowel, your tummy control, your undulating spine, and then lower down through. I think for transitional purposes, we'll have you do one more, right? So you have the nice help of your strap to help you with that leg weight. And then see if you can bend your knees at the top with control, and then just place your feet on the floor. We're going to transition to putting your hands behind your thighs, right? And maybe do one of those little initial sit backs, roll backs that we had in the very, very beginning. Stay in that place. And then you're going to work out unloading both feet from the floor. We're just going to play like we're a little roly-poly doll, the weebles wobble but they don't fall down idea, where you get to roll through. Those little figurines were popular when I was a girl. Right, and we're just trying to roll through the back, which means we have to have a good undulating spine, which we control with our center. You can kind of hear her, she's breathing in as she rolls back, and exhale. So we go back to that metronome here all the way at the end. Good, and you're really just kind of having a little bit of fun. It's nice to have, a soft spot on the rug. If you have a mat, she's taken this to the next challenge, which is holding at the ankles. We call this rolling like a ball. Mr. Pilates designed this exercise to really fulfill that exhale phase and get every ounce of air out of you. Last one. For a healthy system, circulation through the body, and robust breathing mechanism. So that's your little strength Pilates segment of this. You can pick and choose and create a little package for yourself. I think you'll actually enjoy moving around and feel very empowered by doing some of these movements with a little bit of our help.
Okay, so that concludes our grassroots self-treatment kit for older adults. And in my clinical practice, older adults come to see me for a variety of reasons. They might be having pain, limited function, balance impairments, recovering from surgeries, dealing with all kinds of different things, functional limitations. I can't squat, I can't get down on and off the floor anymore. So what we did is try to develop a kit that addresses a lot of those generalized concerns. If you're having more specific pain issues, you should see probably a qualified provider in your area or a movement provider in your area, and get things tailored to meet your needs. We also have our individual regional kits too for neck pain, back pain, all of those things. So check those out. But the bottom line is what I end up giving people in the long run is this stuff, and we get them moving. And we get them feeling better through movement. And that's how we reduce pain, improve function, improve range of motion, circulation, deal with bone loss issues, all of those things that start to get on top of us as we spend more time on earth. But it doesn't mean that as you age, it needs to be a decline. So it's amazing what the body is capable of. So pick and choose what works for you and your body. If that rolling like a ball was no bueno, or you had issues with your spine or something that doesn't allow that to happen, be your own body mechanic, be your own guide. We're here to give you general stuff for a population that might span, 30, 40 years, decades of ages here for the older adults. So keep that in mind. We hope you enjoyed it. Have some fun, play around, and do stuff that's different. That's what your body is probably really asking for. So we hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.